pervasive that even their supreme ally, the Pope, was disturbed. Pope Clement complained to Villaret that the knights' lifestyle was far too lavish.
You ride beautiful fine horses, feast on exquisite meats, wear magnificent apparel, drink from goblets of gold and silver, and keep falcons and hounds for the chase.
But the attitude of the knights remained carefree and defiant. Rhodes became one of the most fortified cities in the world. The independent towers scattered along the city walls were an invention of the knights. Rhodes, so close to Turkey, served the effective purpose of monitoring and holding mainland forces at bay. This was infuriating to Mohammed II, who had conquered Constantinople and extended its empire from Venice to the Russian border. The small island of Rhodes was blocking vital trade between Egypt and Turkey, an unacceptable problem for a mighty empire. The first siege of Rhodes began in 1480. 600 well-adapted knights resisted the onslaught of Mohammed II, and as the Grand Master Aubusson was pierced by a spear, the knights overran the Turks, who retreated. The euphoria of victory and the expectation of renewed attacks sent the knights into a building frenzy. Technology was quickly changing. Bronze cannon with deadly smaller balls had made iron cannons obsolete, and this required new types of fortifications. Walls had to be doubled in thickness to an astonishing 40 feet. Suleiman, the new Turkish ruler, started the second siege in 1522. Martinengo, a legendary military engineer, had built miles of tunnels under the city walls and equipped them with ingenious underground listening devices with bells that would alert the knights to detonate explosives at a distance. Suleiman continued the siege through winter, finally breaking the defenses, but was so impressed by the knights' fighting stamina that he allowed them to leave. Later, Suleiman would deeply regret this generosity. The knights sailed out again, searching for a mission. At the beginning of the 16th century, Spain, which had consolidated its empire with the union of Castile and Aragon and the conquest of Granada, was the only Christian kingdom capable of stopping the Turkish advance. Charles V, King of Spain, needed a buffer against the advancing armies of the Sultan. After the fall of Rhodes, the knights were very wealthy, but homeless, and the royal houses of France, England, and Portugal were again eyeing their riches. In 1530, the Grand Master L'Isle d'Adam quickly accepted Charles V's offer of the island of Malta as the knights' headquarters, in exchange for 1 falcon a year. They could not move in fast enough. Their first task was to turn Malta very quickly into a secure outpost that could withstand any attack. Grand Master Homedis fortified Castel Sant'Angelo, turning it into a massively defended fortress. Fort St. Elmo was built at the end of the Chibaras Peninsula. A chain weighing several tons was ordered from Venice to be stretched across the harbor, cutting off the entrance. North Africa was in Muslim hands and was dominated by the Barbary coast corsairs, headed by Shahreddin, also known as Barbarossa. The Barbary corsairs were the scourge of the Mediterranean Sea. Dutch and English pirates had taught them the use of the Berton, a heavily armed and very fast ship. Sailing out of Tunis, Algiers, and Tripoli, they attacked European ships, stripped them, and took the passengers as slaves. Algiers was a renowned city of 100,000, larger than Genoa and Marseille. And 1/4 of its inhabitants were Christian captives. Spain and the Knights engaged in furious battles all along the African coast, edging close to Maltese waters. When Barbarossa retired, Dragut, an even fiercer warrior, took over. Dragut occupied one of the Maltese islands, Gozo, and took its inhabitants as slaves, defiantly brutalizing his captives in clear view of the neighboring Maltese. Jean de la Valette was elected Grand Master in 1557, the same year the Spanish fleet was crushed in Djerba in the worst defeat of the century. In 1565, Suleiman, encouraged by the success at Djerba and Dragut's easy conquest at Gozo, sent a huge fleet with 40,000 men from Constantinople, heading straight for Malta. When the knights were alerted, they begged Philip of Spain for 25,000 troops. But everyone knew that it would take 3 months to amass such forces, and they would arrive far too late. 1,000 men would be sent from Sicily, and that would be all. The knights knew that they had to hold out until the arrival of the Spanish army, if it ever came. The Turks, on the other hand, knew that the siege had to be victorious in 1 season, before any possibility of reinforcements. It was going to be a test of endurance and a bluffing game. La Valette concentrated most of his forces on St. Elmo, which guarded the harbor's entrance. The Turks would want to take St. Elmo first. If it fell, the knights would have little left to fight for. The attack came from the south, then the west. St. Elmo was practically surrounded. On June 23rd, a major offensive was unleashed. Out of 260 defenders, 200 were dead at the end of the day. But St. Elmo did not fall. Mustafa Pasha, the Turkish commander who expected an easy victory, took the bodies of dead knights, had them nailed to crosses, and floated them toward the Grand Harbor for the population to see. In response, La Valette had the heads of the Turkish prisoners cut off and shot from cannons into the Turkish lines. St. Elmo did fall, but it had drained the Turkish forces and weakened their resolve. The Turks now crossed the harbor to attack Castel Sant'Angelo. But the knights had planted underwater stakes throughout the harbor, which sank the Turkish ships and slowed down the attack. The military forces of the knights were down to 600 men and were unable to resist for more than a few days. Miraculously, the Spanish fleet, under Admiral Garcia de Toledo, sailed into the harbor the night of September 7th. In the morning, the Turks awoke to a fresh invading army of 8,000. The Sultan's army retreated in disarray. After 4 months of one of the most massive military operations of the times, the Ottomans had been defeated. The year 1565 brought the order instant fame. The news of the Maltese exploits traveled all over Europe. 541 Knights Hospitaller, aided by a garrison of some 9,000 men-at-arms, had repelled the repeated assaults of between 30 and 40,000 attackers. The moral significance of the event was enormous. A small group of men had stopped the westward push of the mighty Ottoman Empire. Voltaire, 200 years later, would write, "Nothing in the world is better known than the siege of Malta." All European kings now clearly understood the importance of this small island to the economies of Europe. The royal courts began sending money to Malta to strengthen its fortifications.